Hey everybody, my name is Chris. I'm the lead pastor here at Riverbank Church, and we're having a conversation, question and answer with my friend Brian Neal. How you doing, Brian?
I'm great.
Good, man. Thanks for taking the time to just answer some questions and talk mental health a little bit. Little about our story is, you're my counselor. You kind of know my dirty, man.
I do.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is I think you know mine too now.
I
really
it's
think
kind
we've
of funny
got this
happened,
relationship.
Right?
Yeah, it's been really cool.
It's funny when you're a pastor, and Brian was in ministry as a pastor for a while, and so when the connection happened with us, it was like it kind of happened quite easy.
Yeah.
You understood my background and how I operate. And it's funny, you served at a church that I served at in Florida, and we know a lot of the same people, so it kind of worked out really good.
No, it's been cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get right to the questions,
All right.
man.
Yeah.
So here's what we'll do. I have questions, and we'll just kind of talk through them. Sound good?
Sounds good.
So the first question, I thought this was really interesting. I love it when we have localized that. I think everybody, we're in White River Junction right now. If you're in White River, shout out to everybody who's hanging out with us online. Say, hey, everybody. Yeah. We got the live studio audience, right? So I would be Jerry Springer, I guess. Anyway.
Okay. What would that make me?
Yeah, what was the bouncer's name? Remember the bouncer?
I don't know the guy.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So here's a great question. It says, we live in an area where it's challenging to find a Christian counselor, and other counselors have wait lists nearly a year long. Mm-hmm. Leaning on the Bible is a good foundation, and if you watch the message, you know that, right? But some people need more support during a crisis. How can a church community step up to help those in need of more support in the interim? And what can our small groups do when everyone else in the small group also needs extra support?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, in terms of just trying to fill that need of, when there's nobody available, that's got a 1 month waiting list, or you're just trying to get in there, is there's a resource that I've used before and I've given to people, and it's Focus on the Family, which allows you to go in there and you can put where you're located and possibly be able to connect with the Christian counselor that you may not have known about. And nowadays, and I know, we talked about it a little bit. Well, in fact, our relationship started online. Right? Yeah. This is the first time I'm here in person.
Yeah, we've never met in person until almost 3 years. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it was kind of cool yesterday.
Welcome to the 21st century, right?
Yeah, we met in the parking lot yesterday. And we're like, wow, hey, how's it going?
You're probably wondering, is this guy real?
Yeah.
Or is he a hologram?
Yeah.
I was wondering that about you.
I know. I have a virtual background at my office, yeah. But I say that because going online, and whether it's Focus on the Family or other sites that might give you a connection with a therapist, they don't have to be right here. Now, I know some people want that, and they may even need that, but there's a lot of people, probably 50% of the people that I meet with I do it online. I see people in Florida, I see people in Delaware, I see people all over the place. And so it's a great resource, and I think you're going to be seeing more and more of that. I mean, look at what the pandemic did for us, right? Zoom in itself, a couple people might have used Zoom in the past, but now they use it all the time. So I think that's funny, it's a great thing to do.
So Focus is a great resource. And it's probably good, and we can maybe provide this as a staff, a page, like a resource page for mental health that maybe you could help. I mean, I'm totally shooting from the hip on this one, but it sounds like a good resource that maybe you can help us collaborate on.
Well, and the other thing you can do real quick too is is get your group leaders, your small group leaders, and some of your staff, trained in a little bit of congregational care, and be able to give them the resources, the ability. It just kind of allows them to be an extension of us as Christian therapists, Now, granted, it's not like being a Christian therapist, you have a lot of training, a lot of experience, but just having some of that knowledge and some of those other resources so they can be a touch point for the people that in your church.
That's good. I know if you want to, we could probably put a link up to this on somewhere. When you and I did a conversation back in the spring of 2021, we actually provided a resource that is it's like a collective of Christian counselors around the country and you can contact them. And I actually know, I've talked to some people in our church who said, hey, I actually made a contact with a Christian counselor through that resource. And we'll have to find it and dig that up, but I know it's out there. We put it in that message. So I know you mentioned Rick and Kay Warren Foundation. That's a helpful resource too. And we'll make sure we get those up there. Another question is, God tells us to cast all our anxieties on him. Is experiencing anxiety a sign of unbelief, sin, lack of faith? And by the way, that's 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your cares or all your anxieties upon him. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I was saying in the message earlier, no, I don't think that's, we're no less spiritual simply because we have to think that we have to cast, that action of doing that is what we want to do. But because we have to do it, doesn't make us any less spiritual. It doesn't make us weak. No. It doesn't make us, I don't think it puts us in a place of sin.
Yeah, going to be real vulnerable. One of the reasons I reached out to you almost 3 years ago through a friend, Norm Yeager, was I had a panic attack in the middle of the night. You remember that, honey. I don't think I woke you up, but I had a panic attack. And anybody ever have a panic attack? To be honest, yes, I'd never had one since. That was the first time, but it scared me. And it was during a season where as a pastor, and this is what I love about our relationship is you understand the stresses of a pastor. They're unique of so many professions. And it was the first time I've ever had that happen to me. And I had an anxiety attack. I literally was like, I'm having a heart attack and dying. I don't want to die. I'm not even 50 yet. I have kids that are like, I want to see them get married. This is the stuff. And it's like, so if you've been having an anxiety attack, you can see, and you talked about the stacks. Well, there's like these micro stacks that happen. You start like piling on yourself. Yeah. And that was what led me to call you. And so that question for me is anxiety a sign of unbelief, sin, lack of faith? Absolutely not. It can sometimes, like anything can, but I know for me, I had an anxiety attack because I had a stacks of things going on in my life. Yeah. And they were compounding. And I thought I was dying of a heart attack. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked earlier, before we got on to do the message, that a lot of times anxiety and some of the struggles we have, it's really our body reacting. We're okay. I'm not going to worry about it. I got to go to work. I got a family. I can't be sick, on and on and on. And then finally our body says, you know what? I'm going to shut you down right now. And boom, you're into that panic attack and you don't know how to control it. Yeah. And the worst part about anxiety is people have had a panic attack or have anxiety is now you have anxiety about having anxiety. Yeah. And you start to worry about having another panic attack. Yeah. And so that's just part of what we have to struggle with.
We talked a little bit about this last night over dinner. It's a journey.
Yes.
And this stuff's going to happen. And I hope you guys know if maybe you're dealing with anxiety, it's not sin.
No.
It's life, right? We live in a very unique world where we're inundated with information and pressure unlike any other time in the history of the world. When we were younger, did you hear much about anxiety attack, or panic attacks, anxiety attacks? And it didn't hear as much about it. And I think we have a unique pressure in the world we live in. And God knows that. I love that you said that. If you haven't watched the message, and everybody in the house did, but if you're watching online, you didn't watch this message, I encourage you to watch it. Brian talked about, this whole idea that God's like, he's, pre-existing, he exists now, and he's before us. And so there's a sense it's a journey, and he knows, and he's with us. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So how long does it take to start feeling better after I do make changes? See, somebody has been dealing with depression and maybe some mental health issues, and they're beginning to make change, like they're starting to make changes, but like, what's the time frame on feeling better? Maybe you're here today and you're like, man, I started making changes a year ago, and you still feel some of this.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one magic number.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of joking earlier when the couple comes in and says, a couple sessions and my marriage ought to be better. And it's like, nah, it doesn't really work that way. Yeah. I think it depends on the depth of what's going on. I mean, some people have significant abuse. And, whether that be emotional abuse, physical abuse, or sexual abuse from the past. And that takes a while to work through that. PTSD, guys come back from from Iraq and Afghanistan. It takes a while for them to work through the level of trauma they've had. So I think it really depends on what led up to those anxiety or depression, and it's case by case.
Do you also think that some of the kind of it's the healing? It is a healing process.
Yeah.
And some of the healing process for me has been having people to walk alongside me with the pains of life, right?
Yeah.
Having a counselor, having mentors. I've been real upfront with our church with, I have mentors that are from every season of life. I have, seniors, who are, significantly older, some in my season of life. And I have younger mentors, like new thing I've invited into my life are, millennials who are like kind of in a different season, see things through a different scope. And they kind of surround you and help you navigate that journey. And having people with you is important.
Yeah.
I think if you're like in depression and you're like, okay, I've done everything I need to do. Like you said, you got to move. Okay, I've moved. I'm moving on with my life. I'm adding something new. But if you don't have people with you, godly people, man,
Right.
you're not going to go very far.
Yeah, it's kind of like the spiritual disciplines, right? It's not just one. We just don't pray. We pray, we fast, we go to church, right? We read scripture. We do all of these things. And I think a lot of times, we get, well, that's the lies that Satan wants us to believe.
Yeah.
That we've done everything and we're still stuck. He wants us to be doubtful. Right. He wants us to live in the darkness and be doubtful. And I think it is a journey. If you can grab a hold of that, and that was kind of part of the message I wanted to send tonight, was that it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
It's a journey. It's good. We talked a little bit about Paul's thorn. Remember that?
Yeah.
This is real. I want you guys to hear this. So in the scripture, you've heard Paul talk about, I have a thorn in my flesh, and I've asked the Lord multiple times to remove it. We were talking about like, what could it be? And one of my mentors is, he thinks it's something Paul's, religious background and what he knew, and, it was like a thorn for him. Most people, and I kind of live in the space where I think it's more of like a physical, but what if Paul had a thorn that was a depression? All the things he's been through. If you look at his life, the suffering, the pain, he goes through a litany. What if? That's one of the things I love about the Bible. You talked about this, David. Like, talk about that for a little bit, like in regards to our faith. Because I think sometimes we think it's taboo, you don't talk about, or if I have depression or anxiety, then I'm really not walking with Jesus.
Right.
Can I just tell you, that's a lie from the pit of hell. Okay? If you're dealing with depression and anxiety, that doesn't mean you're not walking with Jesus. That just means you're what?
Yeah.
You're human, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's what's beautiful about these guys in Scripture.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think when we talked about that last night, it was interesting because, I could see it a couple different ways too, right? Is the thorn in his side the burden that he had, right, for the other churches, right? He was always going and telling people about Jesus and about what to do and what not to do. He had a real burden. And the other, thorn could have been the struggle. He's shipwrecked, He's being persecuted. And is the thorn actually that he's always in this place? But here's what I know. Regardless of what the thorn was, what did he do? He always kept God in the center. He was always telling people where to go and what the answer was, to always look towards Jesus.
So regardless of what the thorn is.
Yeah, regardless of what the thorn is.
Jesus. Something just hit me. So in modern days, we call post-traumatic, PTSD. It used to be called shell shock.
Okay.
What if back in the Bible times, they just called it thorn in the flesh?
Yeah.
What if? And the only reason I say that is this isn't like, I don't believe it's new to the 21st century. If you are dealing with depression, anxiety, I promise you it's not new. It's not new.
No.
And I just think we have a lot more communication and advancement in technology, we can identify it more. So
Yeah, well, that's why in that Psalm 143, it actually has the word in that translation, that depression, depressed. So it's nothing new. It just looks a little different.
So what advice do you have for someone who feels like they've tried everything? Like they've seen therapists, counselors, medications. They've done everything and still can't overcome depression or anxiety. What would you say to them?
Yeah, well, I'd have them read that book by Julie Thomas because her whole perspective, that's where she was. She was so deep into it and was trying everything and it wasn't working. And it wasn't until she acknowledged and went back and started reading the Bible from a different perspective, the perspective of it's a journey and that God is with me. And that gives you hope. That begins to shift things in your mind and can start you on the road to recovery from depression. So it's not just like I'm trying everything and nothing's working. It's because you're just always looking for the one solution. It's admitting that I'm in this place. I'm in this place. I'm in this struggle, but God is with me. And now things just start to look a little differently. Even you start to look at what the medication is. Oh, yeah, maybe the medication isn't working today, but maybe it needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe the counseling that I'm getting needs to shift.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to shift. And I see this. I refer people. They might come in and we start to go through their story. And I might say, well, there's some significant specialized piece right here. You've been through significant trauma. I want you to go see someone who specializes in trauma to be able to work through that and be able to tell your story in a way that they might be able to help you.
Yeah.
If we didn't make that shift in counseling, they wouldn't get the help they needed.
Right. Yeah,
So-
some of it is this, like you just said, it's specialized. Maybe you
Absolutely.
need to go to a unique specialist.
Yeah, so I think all of those things you have to take into
That's good.
consideration.
Something you said last night tied to this question is total surrender says, I know God hasn't given up on me. Total surrender says, I know God hasn't given up on me. So for someone, maybe this is your question. I've tried everything. And I would encourage you, according in this conversation we had last night, is continue to live in surrender. And you're going to know, like, God has not given up on you. Live in that surrender. And it says, I know you haven't given up on me. And then the specialized thing, and allow that to come in. I think you can't quit. You've got to keep looking for solutions and know that God is with you.
Yeah.
What is the most common cause for anxiety and depression in your experience?
So of all the people I see, if I had 10 people, I would say, and I think I mentioned this in my message today as well, is that out of 10, there might be one or two that have what we considered chemical imbalances, organic to the brain, and even that can be due to a physical illness. But most are due to relationships, stress, trauma. These are the origins of when people come to see me and they're depressed, they are sad, they are stressed, and we start to unpack, right, those boxes that we were talking about in the stack. They start to see that, well, yeah, of course you're having anxiety or you're depressed. You start to look at what your life has been like. And then we start to unpack that. And then we start to play, each story out. And what we tend to find out is that a lot of it is lies.
Wow.
Lies that they've believed for a long time. Maybe lies that a family member has told them.
Did you guys hear that? Lies. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. The lies are chains. And those lies can cause, you've seen, depression and anxiety. That's something.
Yeah. No, we start to have this story. And a lot of what we try to do is we want to find out who you really are. Who does God say you really are? So when, you have what we call it, an automatic thought. Something happens and I have an automatic thought. Someone growing up, someone told me I was not very smart. So every time I take a test, I think I'm going to fail. But my IQ would actually say, no, I'm smart enough. I could pass any test. But I have this belief now that I'm not smart, that I'm going to fail everything I do. And so we start to counter that with what's true. And that's what I love about how we can bring God's word and really, what is God saying about you as a person? Does he say you're stupid? No. And you start to disprove those beliefs.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. This is a good one, and it's interesting. How do we differentiate between the enemy and what is a chemical imbalance when it comes to mental health issues? And then the follow-up is, how do we know when medicine is necessary in addition to prayer? I think it's a great question. taboo in the church. Not taboo here, but I think if you've grown up in the church, you don't cover this one, or you say, well, we don't need medicine. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, my thoughts on medication are, if you can't carry out your daily functions, you can't go to work, you can't parent your kids, right? You can't leave your house. It's so dysfunctional, your life is so dysfunctional that it may take some medication to help you move from that spot. Medication might also help you receive the counsel. We talked about that earlier today.
Yeah.
In that if I am in such a state of depression that I can't move, then I can't even receive the counsel. And it takes both. I'm a firm believer that if you're on medication, you really need to be seeking the advice of a therapist or a counselor. They go hand in hand. The studies show time and time again that combined, with medication, therapy combined with medication doubles the effectiveness of the medication. What does that tell me? That tells me that over time we might not need it, or we might not need as much. But if you just simply go to your general practitioner and say, I've got anxiety, and he goes, all right, here you go. It's almost always never works.
Yeah, because you're not really getting to the heart of the problem.
No.
You're just trying to we live in the world of quick fixes. Anybody agree with that? And I don't think this is a quick fix. If you're dealing with depression, anxiety, and you go to the doctor for the quick fix, 10 out of 10 times it's not going to be the solution, right? It's that could be part of the solution with counseling or deep therapy or there's some psychotherapy that is helpful, right? And we know this. We've seen some folks who've had to navigate through that. And with some of the severe trauma, like we talked about.
Well, and sometimes it's not always just therapy either.
Right.
It can be like you mentioned. I think someone earlier talked about, recovery.
Yeah.
Get involved in a recovery group.
Yeah. Celebrate recovery.
Celebrate recovery.
Can I get a shout out for CR in the house?
Yeah.
And here's another question. How can you, and this one's really interesting, and I'm going to frame it with me. This is my question to you. Are you ready?
All right.
So how can I, as a leader, share my struggles with, and I'm not speaking from, I don't really struggle with depression, but I'm just saying, what if I was, had this, how could I lead my teams well? If I had depression, and how can I lead my teams? Well, maybe there's in our church, somebody who's leading a team and they deal with it. How can they lead their teams well?
Yeah.
And a follow-up is that it's hard to have it all together all the time, right? Comment on that.
I think the best thing leaders can do is to be authentic with action.
Yeah.
Right? As a leader, if I'm honest with my team, saying, listen, I'm struggling with this. Chris Hodges, right?
Yep.
From Church of the Highlands.
Yep.
I think you said you even met with him.
I was sitting down. I had dinner with Pastor Chris 2 months before the book. He was telling me, we were sitting there talking, he's telling me about this book that's coming out, and we were comparing notes about his counselor, my counselor, we're talking, and he was being honest. He wasn't trying to be like, I got it all together. No, he's like, oh man, Chris.
No, he's being authentic.
Yep.
But here's what he's doing, right? He's doing what I was talking about earlier. He took a step.
Yep.
He took a step. Knowing that he was going in a dark place, he took a step by seeking help, seeking counsel, being honest, communicating, right? And I think if a leader does those things, then his team is going to know that they're still in a safe place. This is a leader that cares for us, wants to lead us well, but he's also getting the help that he needs. Yeah.
On the flip side, the danger, and I think this is what people fear, is if I say I'm dealing with depression, but they don't do anything about it. Do you know what I'm saying? And that is dangerous because we want to be moving. I love what you said. That was the mic drop for me. It's move. You got to move. You got to do something.
Yeah.
So it's okay if you're leading teams and you're I'm dealing with depression, to share other teams, but you've got to move and model that you're doing something about it. And so I think that's crucial for anything, right? You want to be moving. That's growth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The bravest step anyone could take would be if I'm a leader in a certain part of the church and I'm going to celebrate recovery.
Yeah.
That's a courageous move, but that's a great leader.
Yeah, it is. So I don't have any more questions, but I have some things I'd like to I'd probably like 2 or 3 more minutes I want to do. If you were to give any advice to someone who's we have a church of a lot of new believers. And coming into this environment and hearing, this might be like a fire hose to them. What are maybe some real like entry level tips you would give to them about caring for their soul and like kind of their own mental health? Like, because this, like, it's new, right? For them, they're new believers. Maybe speak to that for just a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is to, are they, even as a new believer, are they having a daily conversation with God? And I don't mean, that, I read my Bible every day, I read 4 chapters, or I'm going through the Bible in a year, which I think is great, but are they having a real conversation? And as a new believer, sometimes that's a little, like, they don't know how to do that.
Right.
I mean, I remember, becoming a believer and not really feeling like I could even pray. I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think
you gotta use a lot of big words to talk to the man upstairs, right?
Yeah, and I think just having a conversation and letting God into your life on a daily basis, creating that discipline is probably the first step.
And then knowing, and I'll say this, that you have a safe place here. If there's, I think what can happen, you become a new believer and then some of the things don't go away. Maybe some of the darkness that you spoke of still feels like it's looming. And I've talked to new believers who are like, that didn't go away. And I love what you said earlier. It's a journey. It's a journey. And I would say that, if you're a new believer, it's just like when you have a child, the child isn't instantaneously like a 22-year-old.
Right.
It's a journey for that child to mature. And it's a journey for the new believer. And that darkness isn't necessarily automatically disappear. Sometimes it does, right? Oh, yeah. But it doesn't automatically disappear. And I would say there's hope. Be faithful. Stay on this journey. In that surrender we talked about earlier, stay surrendered to the Lord. He's not leaving you and he's not forsaking you. Yeah.
Well, he's going to use your story too. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, I love it because many new believers have these really awesome stories. Yeah. And they do kind of get depressed in a way when they become a new believer and they're like, I thought it was all going to change. Yeah. And maybe, just maybe, God's not done using your story of what led you to become a Christian.
Yeah. Any parting words?
No, I think
I'm tired, man.
I would just say that you always be talking, right? Never be afraid to talk to somebody. Share your story, and move. You got to take one step at a time.
It's good. Did you guys hear that? Share your story.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And what's the third one? Move.
Move.
Thank you guys so much, everybody online, everybody in the house. God bless you guys. Thanks for being here. And thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.